Excellent. Okay, good. So let's go through here. So last time, I wanted to start off by quickly reviewing what we did last time. I think you can be able to see, hopefully on there, okay? Okay, there we go. Yeah. So, I guess it's good for you, Amit, because you weren't here last time. But yeah, if you're interested in the other slides, oh, did you want to say something, Greg? Or? Sure, that'll be great. The slides are available online, and but I'm not quite sure if you'll be able to get them because you're not enrolled in the course.
Similar to the lectures that have been put up on the YouTube channel?
Basically, although this one will be a little bit different. So yeah, so yesterday, like the lecture on Tuesday is a lot similar. So, yeah. Okay, so I want to just recap for 5 minutes what we did last week. So first of all, we talked a lot about user experience, and I shared this quote here about how long the product is no longer the basis of how the experiences. And I gave you the example of the some good and bad experiences. We talked about the rubbish bin that was like an infinite rubbish bin, and then the piano stairs, and the Nokia N-Gage that wasn't well designed. So this fits in with the experience economy idea, where companies try and build more value by going up this chain here, and the engagement with the consumer changes from a functional engagement to more of an emotional engagement. Then I gave a definition of interaction design, which is designing people's experience with technology. And then we showed the video for Bill Verplank where he said it involved answering these 3 questions. So how do your actions affect the world? How does the world respond to what you did, and so what do you sense of the world? And then what do you know and what do you learn from that response? And then we also talked about how interaction design is concerned with the engagement of technology over time. So oftentimes things like graphic design or interface design are concerned about the technology at a single snapshot in time, what's on the screen at a single point in time. Whereas in this case, it's more about the engagement with the technology over time and having some sort of conversation with the machine. And because of that, it involves many, many different skills. So here's a snapshot of some skills you might have in a good interaction designer. And then I briefly introduced the interaction design process that involves these 3 steps. You'll see oftentimes when you read about interaction design, you'll see cycles that are similar to this. They may involve fewer or more steps, but they generally involve these 3 areas. One is the discovery of the user needs. Secondly is to design around those needs and do some prototyping. And then thirdly, to evaluate the design, and then just keep on doing that over and over again until eventually your product pops out. And we gave the example of the Bunratty theme park that we talked about with the mobile augmented reality application, how the person doing that went through this whole process. She interviewed people, she watched what they did, she then did some sketching to see what people sketched out user interfaces and produced 3 versions of prototypes. 4 before 3 before she finally came up with the final video prototype, and then each step of the way she evaluated it as well. So I also gave you the paper to read from HCI to interaction design. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit to see if anybody had any thoughts about the paper. So let me just open it up. Here we go. So first of all, does anybody have any questions about what I just went through from last week? Was there anything that wasn't clear for you? No? Okay. So this paper from HCI to Interaction Design, it's written by Jonas Långgren from Malmö University in Sweden. And Malmö University was one of the first universities in the world to have an interaction design program. In fact, I put up the website the other day. So they have this. This is their. They have a 2-year master's degree that you can do in interaction design. So it's essentially what we're trying to do at the HIT Lab here, but probably in more depth because they're doing 2 years rather than a year. But it covers a lot of the same things. But this was the one of the first interaction design master's programs in the world. And Sweden and the Scandinavian countries are kind of leaders in the area of interaction design. So hopefully all had the chance to read through the paper. Did anything jump out at people when they were reading it that was particularly interesting for you? Or, of course, Ahmed didn't read it, but yeah. Anything else jump out at anybody from reading the paper?
It was interesting that they constantly, not only the technical side, but also the creative side.
Right, yeah. So I think that's really interesting because oftentimes in engineering programs, oftentimes it's people are focusing on a technical solution. But hopefully what you get through this course is that sometimes the solution to problems aren't just technical, they involve a lot of human element as well. In fact, I highlighted this quote down here. So the beginning part of the paper goes through kind of a history of the evolution of human-computer interaction. It starts talking about the Association for Computer Machinery, ACM, in the early 90s, they put out a curriculum for human-computer interaction and said this is what people should study. But that's evolved over time. And there's this really good quote from, here it is, from Terry Winograd. Terry Winograd's a very famous computer scientist who's at Stanford University. And he says, in the next 50 years, the increasing importance of designing spaces for human communication interaction will lead to the expansion in those aspects of computing to focus on people rather than machinery. These methods, skills and techniques concerning these human aspects are generally foreign to those of the mainstream computer science, and it is likely they will detach, at least partially, from the historical roots to create a new field of interaction design. And that was in 1997, and then indeed it's kind of happening now. So he's basically saying that traditional or mainstream computer science doesn't study or consider a lot some of the human aspects that that involve the technology, and because of that, then there's likely to be this new field being created called interaction design, which is what's happening now. And then he goes on to talk a little bit about what interaction design is. So he talks about, well, what is design, and that involves more creative and construction work, and interaction involves the interaction between the user and a system. So he provides his own definition. So interaction design refers to the shaping of interactive systems with particular emphasis on their use qualities. And then he gave some examples, and one thing that struck out to me is at the end of the paper was this idea here, where this idea of transitioning from focusing on the user's low-level problem to a more general problem understanding. So if look at this little conversation here, it says one person says, well, I need a PDA calendar, can you recommend one? And the second person is, well, why do you need a PDA calendar? Well, because I do, that's why. Seriously, why do you need a PDA calendar? He says, well, I can't fit all my appointments into a paper calendar and I still want something small I can carry in my handbag. So then what he does, instead of saying, well, this is a piece of software that can fix it, he says, well, maybe we should look at your situation and see whether we can cut down on all your appointments. So actually what the person might need is not necessarily a PDA calendar, but they might need to be able to restructure their work so they actually have fewer appointments rather than trying to fit more into the day. So this notion is trying to, and we'll talk more about this today, where sometimes you will observe a conflict between what somebody says and what they really do and what they need, and that's an opportunity for designing a solution. And then finally, he talked here about the interaction design program that they set up at Malmo, and this talks about their Design League program, which is basically focused around individual projects, or individual group projects and small group interaction. So if you haven't had a chance to finish reading the article, you should read through and think about this and how it relates to what you're studying today and how the HIT Lab is working as well. Okay, so let's go back to the lecture. So what I want to do, the first part of the lecture today, is kind of give a little bit of a historical overview of the evolution from HCI to interaction design, and talk about how people's use of computers has changed. So, 50 years ago, if you're very lucky, you may have had access to a computer, and the computers might have looked something like this. This is a UNIVAC computer from the 60s. Going back even a little further, this is called the Z25 computer. This is, if you go to the Computer Museum in Germany, you'll see an example of this. And this was made in 1956. And so it has a kind of typewriter keyboard input there. It's got a rotary phone. It's got this paper output. And this one ran at 2.6 kilohertz processor speed. And I guess that's, 10,000 times slower than a gigahertz. So, and it cost about $40,000. So, same price as a pretty nice car today. We'll get that computer that's far slower than what you've got on your cell phone. And of course, in the 50 years since then, computing has changed dramatically from, here's a tablet computer from a couple of years ago using a stylus to interact with it. And the reason for that is because of Moore's law. So here's this graph of time on one axis and processing power, but the processing power up the left-hand side is logarithmic. So each of those is steps is a power 1,000 times more powerful than the last step. So it starts at 10 to the minus 6 down here and goes up to 10 to the 9 at the top there. And what you can see is a steady increase in processing power. And the reason why that happens is because of these different generations of technology. So at the left-hand side of the graph is mechanical computers. And then, by the 1940s or so, then you had the relay computers, and the Z25 that I showed you is an example of one of those. And it's, as you can see, the Z3 and 4 and 5. And then there were vacuum tubes and transistors and so forth up to the microprocessors that we have today. And there's the cost along this side as well. So you can see the cost of hardware in $1978, so it's a bit low, but 10 to the power of 18 for one of those relay computers compared to a very high-end supercomputer across the top here that's about $10 million or so. So huge amounts of computing cost. So you've had this huge increase in processing power, and what that means is that now can dramatically change how people interact with computers. So let's go through a little brief history, and you can see that. So first of all, in the very old times when people were using different tools, it was really about using tools that were designed for a purpose. So here's a plane for planing wood, and it's custom designed, and it's really about building a tool that's very, very efficient for using. So some of the qualities they have is that they're very useful, they're very designed specifically to the right people, and they have a very good fit to the people as well. So this is kind of pre-computer days. Well, the same thing kind of happened in the early computers. So the first computers in the 40s and 50s, it was really about the user learning how to use the machine. So here's the people programming ENIAC. So here's the woman here that are programming by hard wiring cables into the machine. And then you went from that to flipping switches and providing tape put out on tape, and punch card computers where you'd feed a whole deck of cards into the computer, and then you would have to punch these cards yourself. Here's one of the cards. In fact, when I very first went to university in the 80s, they just the year before had retired the punch card computer that they were using at my university. So, but they were still using paper tape computers here. So here's a tape that has holes punched into programming. So one of the innovations that happened about the 60s was online processing. So here's an example of the very first computer game that was developed called Space War. And these two guys are sitting with an oscilloscope playing with joysticks this game. And it was one of the first times that you, instead of having to do a batch process where you had a whole bunch of cards you stuck to the computer and then you went away and came back 4 hours later and had the output, now this time the computer responded directly. And in fact, you can still play this game. I can show you a little demo. So here's a Space War website. And what happens with the game is you have it's a two-player game. So I've just died. So there's a black hole in the middle here, and then there's these two spaceships, and the goal is to try and get away from the black hole. So I can put some thrust in there, and I can fire the other spaceship as well, and avoid getting sucked in. At the same time, you can be shooting at your enemy. You can shoot missiles at them as well. So pretty simple game, and it was designed by physicists, so they had very accurate modelling of the gravitational field and the black hole, but entertaining nonetheless, I guess. So that led to command line interfaces, and some of the first computers I used had command lines. But in fact, those of you who use Linux today are still using command lines. So it's a very efficient way to use computers, but you have to learn the commands to be able to use. But in this case, it was a lot about the user learning how to use the computer. Then you're going to have the second generation of computing where the focus is on building pieces of software that were more easy to use. And instead of learning how to operate the machine, and it was about learning specific pieces of software. So, for example, learning how to use a spreadsheet, a word processor, or playing a game. One of the innovations that helped with that was the invention of the mouse. So this is in 1964 with Doug Engelbart. This is his original two-wheeled mouse with mechanical wheels. And another innovation was of interactive graphics. So a little bit later a year later than Space War, Ivan Sutherland finished his PhD thesis at MIT, and he developed what was called Sketchpad. So you can see this little screen here. Around him, you can see this large computer. So the computer still took up the size of a room, but on this little screen here, he developed one of the first interactive graphic CAD programs. So you could use, in this case, use a light pen, and you could draw on the screen, and you could create graphics. And I've got a little video of this working. Okay, so let's see the video. So I'll just turn the audio off because it's quite annoying, and then I'll go open up the video here. So this is Alan Kay, who's another very famous person in computers, giving an explanation of Sketchpad. But I'll fast forward a little bit, and what you can see here is you can see him using Sketchpad. So he's using a light pen to draw lines, and the computer had some knowledge in it, so when he touches those two lines together, it will try and make the lines parallel. So there's a light pen, and on the left-hand side there's physical buttons. So you can push the buttons to go into different modes, and then you can interact with the computer. So it was also a kind of two-handed interface as well. And for the time it was a revolution because everybody else was using punch cards and tape, and he was now using a light pen and interacting with the computer. So now he's zooming out and things like that. And then, of course, one of the most famous examples is VisiCalc. So VisiCalc was developed by Dan Bricklin, and it was the first spreadsheet. And it was one of the first examples of a killer app. So this enabled people to complete their budgets and everything on the computer. The computer would, you can program the cells, it would automatically create the solutions. And it was so popular, and it would only ran on the Apple II computer, so that businesses would specifically buy the Apple II computer so they could use this piece of software. So it was a big revolution in computing. And then you also had examples of early word processors. So this is WordStar that was developed in the late 70s. And it was it lets you type text and insert commands into the text that would format it. So it was very complicated to use, but it was also one of the first standalone word processors. So that was kind of the second generation of computing, where the focus is on building pieces of software that you'd want to use, but in most cases you'd use the software by itself. So you'd sit down and you'd have your Apple II, and you'd be running VisiCalc and spend an evening doing your books and something like that. So that kind of brought the third generation of computing, and one of the key points of the third generation of user interfaces was that they realized that sometimes you wanted to do a task that involved several programs. So, if you want to, for example, develop a brochure for marketing that might involve you using some image software to do some image development. It might involve you doing some text input for text entry. It might involve you developing using a spreadsheet to develop a graph or something. So you have to use several pieces of program to accomplish the one task. So let me show you a video of one of the first examples of that was important. So this is let me just pause this. So this is an advert for a very famous advert. It was only shown once. This is for the Apple Macintosh. It was only shown once on TV, and it was shown during the 1984 Super Bowl. So they spent millions of dollars to build this one ad, and but it had a huge impact. So let me show you the ad.
Glorious anniversary of the information purification methods. First time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each will remain bloom, secure from the pests, where a contributory force. Force is more powerful weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. They shall talk themselves to death, and we will hide in their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
So of course they're referring to the book 1984, which is George Orwell's famous book that was talking about kind of a dystopian future. So that was the Macintosh, and what the Mac introduced was the notion of having multitasking and being able to have a graphical user interface that you swap between tasks. Now, Apple wasn't the first company to develop that. It was developed by Xerox PARC in the late 70s, and they had their Star and their Lisa, their Star computer that wasn't commercially successful, but Steve Jobs saw that, and he had his team reproduce it and create first of all the Lisa, then the Mac. And it's interesting to watch some of the early advertising. So one of the things that's sometimes interesting to remember is that when people started using the Mac, many people didn't know how to use a mouse, and of course today it's very common knowledge. And so some of the early advertising looks a little bit strange. Let me show you an example of one of those ads. There's a very famous actor in it. And why is that not playing? Let's try that again. Huh. That's not. Oh, let me see if I can open it with another tool. Okay, let's try this. So this is for the Lisa, so it's not for the Mac, but the Lisa was kind of the generation just before this. And see if you can recognize the actor, isn't it?
Has very little to do with the clock.
So look how he's holding the mouse there. It's
isn't anymore. That's why we make the most advanced personal computers in the world. And why soon there'll be just two kinds of people. Those who use computers. Yeah, I'll be home for breakfast. And those who use apples.
So this is the Apple Lisa, and so well, first of all, that was Kevin Costner in the movie there. So before he became a big star, I guess. And you can see when he's using the mouse there, he's kind of holding it really strangely. He's kind of holding it sideways and clicking with the side of his finger. You'd never do that now, but in those days, he didn't know how to use a mouse, and no, hardly anybody else did. So, and of course they've still got the one-button mouse like they did in those days as well. So that was the the Lisa and the Mac, and that introduced multitasking and allowed people to, and have this GUI interface that allowed people to swap between windows on the computer. So that kind of leads us to the fourth generation computing, which is where computers now are designed to try and help provide experiences and support us in our everyday life experiences. So, with performing a task, oftentimes you would go, hey Gun, we just had some trouble with the projector, I'm not sure. So in the earlier version, in the performing a task, oftentimes you'd go to the computer room or you'd go somewhere to perform the computing task. But in this fourth generation, then the goal is to have the computer kind of come to you and support you in everyday life activity. So you're trying to design to support people doing their activity in context. So here's some examples of some context. In the middle, here's kind of a very messy desk. So you can imagine if you're designing a mouse or input device, it might work really well in the lab, but in the real work context where you've got your desk surrounded like that, it may be difficult. Or here's a woman who's trying to use the phone with her son on her lap. So she's got an address book on her left hand and the phone in the right hand. So you can imagine if you're trying to design a user interface for an address book, you may need to design it for this situation here where you're splitting attention between both tasks. Or the mobile that you need to use on the go in the real world. So this leads to what we talked about last time with how the interaction is more about designing a conversation between computers. So this is where a lot of technology development is now, is this kind of fourth stage. But there's a couple more stages as well. So one is this notion of connectivity. So in the last decade, devices have become highly connected. And so that means now when you're thinking about designing user experiences, you're not just designing for one person, you're designing for more than one person. So people are quite good at designing for individuals, and they're also becoming quite good at designing for individuals interacting with technology. But now the machines are kind of fading into the background, and it's becoming more and more important to design not just for the interface, but also for designing interaction between people and for designing how to interact with communities. So, for example, a good example of that is Facebook. When Facebook or the predecessor MySpace was being developed, they're very basic and crude, and they really didn't have much of an idea about how to design for interacting between large groups of people. And now when you're building a system like Facebook or Snapchat or Weibo or any some other apps like that, you've got to think about how can this application be used by hundreds of millions of people to connect hundreds of millions of people together. And it's very different from a single user experience. And so we're kind of going through that phase now. And then the next phase of design, which we're entering, but is still very much an active area of research, is this idea of being able to have interfaces that are dynamically enabled. And what that means is that the computer itself should adapt to you. So at the beginning of this, the small blue square operating the machine, we've seen about how it was all about the human learning how to use the computer. You had to learn how to do the punch cards or program the wires or the command line. But now, over the 50 or 60 years, now it's about the machine trying to adapt to you. So there's a couple of examples. You can think of, when you share documents with people, oftentimes you will convert the document to a PDF file and then email it to the person. Well, wouldn't it be much more sensible that the computer knows that you want to share a document, and when you attach the document to your email, it automatically converts it to a PDF regardless of format and sends to them? Or when you're listening to the radio, so you're listening to your morning edition on the radio this morning, and then when you go from the bathroom to the bedroom to the kitchen and into the car, shouldn't your radio in those different areas know what you're listening to and automatically tune to that station and send the music to you? In fact, this is kind of automatically happening a little bit. I saw an ad on TV the other night for, what was the service on Vodafone? It was a, there's some now streaming video service that, it's not Netflix, but it's compared to in New Zealand. something, I can't remember the name of it, but their big thing was, well, if you start watching on your laptop, then when you pick up your tablet and log in, it'll resume watching at the exact same point of where you're watching the show before, or on your phone. So you could basically use any device you want with this player, and it will automatically play from the point where you left off. So it's kind of coming, but this is the new area of interaction design, is being able to design technology that automatically adapts to you. The reason for that is that, and again with Moore's law, as you've got more and more processing power, you've got more and more processing power that you can devote to the user experience. So in the 50s, it was just impossible to have a graphical user interface because to even have the memory to be able to provide a frame buffer to draw the graphics would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and your processing power wasn't fast enough to even draw the graphics on the screen. But over time, as you've got faster and faster computers, the interaction has changed with the technology. So now you've got the surplus of processing power. You've got gigahertz processors, CPUs, and you don't need a gigahertz CPU to be able to do word processing. So you've got lots of extra processing power, which has led to things like speech-enabled computers. Or when you combine the processing power into cloud computing, then you've got things like Watson, where you've got a computer that can answer freely posed speech questions, can do semantic analyze on the answer, and then produce the output and generate an output as well. So you can see that over the next few years, there's going to be a very dramatic change in how people interact with technology, and it's becoming much more human-centric. So you've got things like Microsoft Connect that allow you to use your gestures to interact with the technology. You've got Internet of Things that lets you monitor where people are and respond automatically and things like that. But as that happens, the design problem becomes a lot more complicated. So, does anybody have any thoughts or questions about that? Great. Did Gunn provide any help, Greg, or?
We're going to after, because
Okay.
for recording purposes,
Okay.
we were set up now actually works very well.
Okay, great.
Even better than the projector. But,
Okay.
the screen might not be the best for people who are in the room.
Sure.
But the camera focused on the TV screen.
Okay. That's fine. That's great. So let's go to the second part of the lecture, which is about the needs analysis. So, so I showed you this slide before about how it has design process. So what I've just talked about is how you've got now a lot more opportunities than you had before to engage or design with technology, because and now what we're going to talk about is how you go through this process. So the first step of this process is needs analysis, or discovering people's needs. And so the goal of this is really to create a deep understanding of the user and the problem space. You can't really design a solution to a problem unless you understand what the problem is and who's likely to be using it. So sometimes when you're in the technology space, you ask a company who are going to be their users, and they'll say, well, everybody's going to use our technology. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be great. But the challenge with that, though, is that sometimes when you think everybody's going to use your technology, it becomes really, really hard to design for that. So you might need to understand their specific needs. So, for example, here's 3 different cars, and so Alessandro's goal is that he wants to go fast and have fun. So he would like to have some sort of thing like a Porsche or a convertible. And whereas Marge, she might be like a soccer mum, and she wants to have a big car. She can carry around lots of children in it, and has to be very safe and comfortable. And Dale, he's a construction worker, so his goal is to haul around lots of dirt and to be reliable and carry lots of weight. So they're all cars, but you can see they've got very different. They look very different because each of their users have different needs. And if you try to mash them together and design for everybody, then you wouldn't have a solution that worked for anybody. So here's a kind of a mashup of a Porsche with a van, and it's got the wheels of the truck on it, and you can see that would just be a nightmare. And there's lots of examples of cars in the car industry where people had tried to build SUVs that look like convertibles, or things that just didn't work. So, but one of the challenges is figuring out who your users really are. So sometimes it's not as obvious as you think. So of course there are people that interact directly with the product, that are users, but there might be other users as well. And Eason, in this paper, he talks about how there's 3 categories of users. There's the primary user, who is the person that's going to mostly use the technology. There's a secondary user who uses it occasionally, or somebody else. And there's the tertiary user, who might be influenced by its introduction or influence its purchase. So, for example, we did a project a little while ago for a company in Christchurch called Dynamic Controls. And Dynamic Controls, they make electric. Well, they make the control systems and the drivetrains for electric wheelchairs. So if you have a mobility scooter, or if you have a wheelchair for somebody who's severely disabled, it's highly likely that they're the ones that did the electronics and the engines for it. But when we talk to them about how clients came to use the technology, it turned out it's not what you might expect. So if you're a disabled person, you don't just go down to the electric wheelchair shop and search through and buy one. At least not in New Zealand. What happens in New Zealand is that you're oftentimes provided or a wheelchair by a medical provider like a hospital, and they will get a grant from the government to buy the chair for you. So the end user, in fact, has very little input in this case into the purchasing process, because the government has some agreement with the hospital and says, okay, here's 10 different chairs that you can provide, and now figure out which one is best for your person, and we'll pay for one of them. So when we were doing this project with this company, when we started talking about usability and users, it turned out that in this case it's very different from developing a piece of software, because the person who was going to use it really didn't have much input into the purchasing power. It wasn't them that was buying it. So let me give another example that you can think about. So imagine that we've developed a technology for our iPad here that allows us to, it's a smart shopping cart. So you can take the iPad and you can put it on the shopping cart, and then it will show you, guide you around the store and help you find all the items on your shopping list. So it's an in-store navigation aid and shopping aid. So if you were to do that, then who do you think would be the various stakeholders that would have an interest in that technology? So can anybody think of anybody?
Generally, a stay-at-home mother.
Yep, so the mother or somebody who would be using that's definitely one stakeholder.
Supermarket.
Yep, let me make a list up on the board here. So, I guess we could say the shopper. And what did you say, Robert?
The shop owner.
Shop owner? Why do you say that?
Because it has to, work with it as well.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, what were you going to say?
Oh, it just has to integrate with their shop properly and everything. So.
Right. So you can imagine that if you were to deliver the technology, maybe it would be the shop that would deliver it, in which case they might have had the app created, and they'd have to then, or maybe some third parties develop the app, and then they have to go and talk to all the shop owners, get permission to show. What were you going to say, Shen?
Vendors.
The vendors?
Vendors who provide the product.
The food vendors,
shop
yeah.
owners maybe ask them to buy some money or to buy this product, to buy this apps.
Sure, definitely, yep. Can anybody think of anybody else who's affected by it?
Maybe something like a franchising store, going by the example that a particular business has the app designed for them. So in the sense that stores are laid out in a particular way, so you do have to look at everything, enticing you to buy. So the app can essentially do that for the store.
Yeah, that's true.
Direct people around.
So the franchise owner. So there could be a few other people affected. So one person. So I've got a kind of a slide here. So so of course there's the customers, there's the vendors and suppliers you talked about, the managers and owners. So it may not necessarily be the individual shop owner, but it could be the manager for the whole chain. Another person that could be affected would be the checkout operators and the people that are working in store. Previously you would have had customers oftentimes ask the people in the store how to find different products. They may not necessarily do that now, but their interaction with checkout operators may change as well. So when you're thinking about the stakeholders, you've got to think about the broader surrounding impact of all the technology as well. I guess Robert's just finishing a project to develop a navigation app for the university, and it turns out there are quite a few stakeholders in that app. Who are the different stakeholders that you had to deal with when you were putting that together?
Basically, like university, health and safety, marketing department, the web team, some users as well, I guess, testing. That's mostly it.
Yeah, so there's and then the users, there's different types of users. There are people that are students, there's faculty, there's the casual people coming on campus. But a lot of the work was around things like getting the data from campus IT, getting it worked out, and all things like that. And then we also have to think about what we mean by needs. So users often really know what's possible, and they oftentimes can't tell you what their needs are. So in some cases what you need to do is you need to look at what they do currently and then try to infer from that what their needs are. For example, when I showed you the earlier slide from the paper with the conversation about the PDA, it turned out that their need may not necessarily be to having a better PDA software. It may be that what they need is to organise their schedule better. So you can do this by considering users' context or looking at the information that they require, or how they work with other people as well. And then, as we talked about a little bit last lecture, you've also got to consider the whole user. So I gave you the example of the Nokia N-Gage, and when people started using it, people laughed at them and it didn't meet their needs. So you've got to think about the user in terms of not just their cognitive, physical needs, so if they can actually use the technology, but also some of their emotional or their social and cultural needs. And it's very interesting looking at technology adoption across cultures. For example, in some cultures, people use different hand gestures to mean the same thing. Like when you're counting in New Zealand, you'll oftentimes raise your fingers to count like this one. In other countries, you'll put your fingers down, like in Japan, you'll count by pushing the fingers down. Or in New Zealand, you'll say, come here like this. In Japan, it's like coming like this one. Or I guess in China, maybe too. So it's quite different gestures that mean the same thing. So if you're building a gesture-based interface, then you need to make sure that in your gestures that you use for counting or coming here is going to work across different cultures as well. So there are a range of different methods that you can use to understand people's needs better. And so there's a few of them are listed here. So here's 4 basic methods. One is to learn from people. Second is to learn from experts. The third is to immerse yourself in the context. And the fourth is to learn from analogous settings. So I'll go through each of these and explain them a little bit in turn. So first of all, learning from people. So this is one of the key ways to learn people's needs, which is basically to meet with people and to try and brainstorm and figure out by talking with them what their needs really are. And so, of course, a key part of that is being able to interview people. And so I'll talk a little bit in some interviewing techniques, but what you're trying to do with interviewing, of course, is you're trying to understand people's thoughts, emotions, their motivations, and their behaviours, and identifying their needs. So, but it turns out it can be quite tricky sometimes to have good interviewing skills. So I'll show you some more about that in a second. A second method is to learn from experts. So this is when you talk to experts in the field to ask about their opinion about different things. One of the challenges of this is to find experts that can really help you provide good feedback. Another way of learning from experts is also if people have documented processes, then you can learn from that as well. So if there's a manual, for example, that says this is how our company is supposed to operate, then you can read through the manual, and that encompasses expertise as well. A third technique is immersing yourself in the context. And this is really important because sometimes you're trying to design for people that you may not necessarily relate to. You know, you can imagine if you're a 30 or 40-year-old interaction designer and you're trying to design a toy for 5-year-old girls, it might be very hard for you to be able to design that without understanding their context. And so what you do in this case is you try and put yourself in their place. So for example, on the left, right-hand side here, here's an example of some people role-playing. So this is a woman from a design company in the US, and they're designing some technology that goes into the emergency room in the hospital. But she'd never been to hospital before, so she couldn't understand what it was like to go to hospital. So what they did in this case is they put her through the process of being admitted to hospital and going into the ER and being wired up with everything as well. So she could understand exactly what it felt like to be checked into hospital. On the left-hand side here, this is an elderly gentleman, and his wife has recently died. So previously, she was the one that did most of the food shopping, and so he really hadn't spent very much time in the grocery store. And so they were trying to design technology that would help elderly shop in the grocery store. So in this case, they followed him around and observed him while he did shopping to see what he was doing. And another technique is what's called cultural probes. And the idea with cultural probes is that you give people a set of tools that they can use to record their lives and environments. So here's an example of that. So this is a plastic bag that had different things in it. One of the things that had in it was a camera, a single-use disposable camera. On the back of the camera was printed a list of photographs people should take. So they would say things like, take a picture of your favorite toy, take a picture of the meal you're having for dinner tonight. It's 5 o'clock on Thursday, take a picture of where you are right now. So all these pictures would help somebody else understand what they're doing. Then this little thing here, which is this paper cone, they said, use this glass to listen to sounds around your home. So what you're going to do is you have this paper cone here, and you put it up to, you listen in different situations. So you put it to the wall of your bedroom, and it says, what sounds can you hear coming through your bedroom wall at 10 o'clock at night? And some other tools as well. So the idea is you give this bag to, 20 or 30 of these bags out to people, then you collect back in what they did with it, and it gives you a snapshot of kind of their daily lives. When you do this type of thing, you're trying to ask these what, how, and why questions. So you start from concrete observation, so what is the person doing? And then you think about understanding, so how are they doing it? And you finish with interpretation, which is why are they doing it. So it's kind of a high-level, a hierarchy of questions. So for example, in this picture here, what's happening? Well, it looks like this little girl here is picking up carrots. And then how is she doing it? Well, she's smiling. It looks like she's it's bigger than her, so it looks like she's having fun. And so why do you think they're doing that? Well, somehow it's been made into a game, so somehow gardening has been made to be fun. So by asking those 3 questions, you can get a deeper level understanding of what's going on and why the situation might be going on. And finally, you can seek inspiration in analogous settings. So, for example, you might want to, you might be redesigning a library, and you might want to look at the problem of crowd control. So, how do you, how are you going to make sure people in the library can get served efficiently and at the checkout and everything? So you might go to an Apple store, you might look at how Apple does that in crowd control. So you should think about the problem you're trying to solve, and then look for analogous settings. Here's another example here about trying to look at crowd control, and this is Sentosa Island in Singapore. So you want to look at how they can manage people trying to buy tickets. So maybe you go to another setting like here on the beach where they're trying to manage people getting onto this boat, and you can see how they do that as well. And then you can take some lessons from that and apply to there. Maybe they have something like they go down the line and give people armbands before they even get to the boat, and that's used to determine what type of row they're doing. So maybe they could take that same idea and put it into the line here when they're waiting for tickets as well. So those are the 4 approaches you can use for needs analysis: learning from people, learning from experts, immersing yourself in the context, and learning from analogous settings. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the skills that you might need. So data gathering. What are some techniques you think you can use to gather data from people? Does anybody have any ideas? Questionnaires, yep, that's really common. And it's actually a really good method, because now you can do online questionnaires and you can distribute your questionnaires to hundreds of millions of people. You know, with Facebook, you can target specific user groups and get responses just from those groups as well. What are some other methods that you could do? Observations, yep, and talking. So like interviewing, yep, that's definitely true. What else? Experiments, yep. So let's start through here. So first of all, the questionnaires. So that's a really good way to gather information, and it's very good, as I said before, gathering data from a very large, dispersed group. And with questionnaires, you can look at both qualitative and quantitative results. And Gunn's going to talk about that in his lectures, where he'll give you some ideas about how to design questionnaires. So they can design them in a way that people provide specific answers, or they have free-form answers where they can write whatever they want. You can analyse that. And then interviews. So this is a really good way to explore issues, sometimes using props. So sometimes, for example, you might have an interview where you show people something and say, what do you think about this? And then you can guide through from that. You can have a structured interview where you have fixed questions or unstructured. But these can be time consuming, and you can't query as many people as you could with the questionnaire. Then other techniques is workshops or focus groups. So in this case, you will oftentimes gather people together that have a shared interest, and then you'll show them some ideas and get feedback from them, or have them engage in some sort of task. You can actually have people engage in some sort of design task. Observations, we talked about that already. And then documentation. So, you know, if people have already documented ways to use systems, you can look through that as well. So let me talk about interviewing a bit more in detail, because it's a really, really important skill to have, and sometimes people aren't very good at interviewing. So if you're conducting an interview, what are some important things you think you need to think about before you go into the interview and while you're doing the interview?
Questions can't be pointed, in the sense that you need data, but you can't ask very pointed questions, because you may get very varying degrees of answers.
Right, yeah, so the questions are really important. So pointed questions, so you shouldn't do things like show them something and say, okay, well, this is a really bad interface, what do you think's bad about it? And then you're already gearing people towards that. Also closed questions, so questions that I can answer with a yes or a no. So if you said, do you like this button on the screen, then the person might say yes or no, and then that's the end of the question, which doesn't really help you. But it's much better to ask opening questions, like say, well, what do you like about this button on the screen? And they'll typically answer more. What are some other things that you think are important?
Choose who you are to interview.
That's right, yeah, it's really important to know which people we want to talk to. And we've already talked a little about stakeholders and how it's important to get different types of stakeholders. Yeah. Well, another important thing is the process. So what you try and do with an interview is to open with comfortable or non-threatening questions. So there are questions that you can ask that people are happy to answer, you know, like what the people's name is, what they do for a job. Those things are very comfortable and non-threatening. Then once you've done that, by doing that, you're kind of building a rapport or connection, then you can start asking broad questions. So tell me about this, or what if this thing happened, and then you can kind of probe deep and steeper questions. So interviews somehow follow this process here, where you typically introduce yourself for the project, you build rapport, and once you have rapport or understanding and the person kind of likes you and is opening up to you, then you can start asking them to share more about their experiences. And what you're trying to do in many interviews is you're trying to have them share emotions or their feelings about things. And when they do that, that's when you can capture some of the essence of what the key problem is. And then at the end, you typically have a wrap-up time as well. So good interviewing skills typically involve 4 different points: listening, watching, creating trust, and informing the design. So one of the most important skills that you can have for interviewing is listening. So you're not there to teach or train the person, or to give them an idea of how much you know. What you're there to is to listen to them and understand them, what they're trying to say. So you should really treat them as a really precious resource and a precious partner. And remember also that they know a lot more about what their domain is than you do. You try and get that out of them. So here's some kind of tips around interview questions. So first of all, there's 2 types of questions. There's closed questions and open questions. And the closed questions are easy to analyse, but the open questions are the ones that give you the better information in some ways. So you should avoid things like long questions, questions that are complicated, that involve several parts, language the person might not understand, leading questions, questions have some sort of biases in them. So you really want to ask why questions, encourage people to tell stories or share their experiences. Pay attention to some non-verbal cues. So sometimes when people start answering questions, they may look nervous or show some non-verbal cues that are different from what they're saying verbally. And also your short answers. Then another important skill to have is watching. So people oftentimes will say things that they want you to hear, or they think that you want them to hear. But if you watch people, you might find that they behave in different ways. So here's a simple example. You can imagine a person is interviewing a person about how to set the margins in Microsoft Word or something like that. So the person says, "Oh, do you know how to set the margins?" And the person says, "Oh, yes, I do it all the time." And so he said, "Okay, can you show me how to do it?" "Sure." And then the person starts pushing a whole bunch of buttons that are unrelated to setting the margins, and then a beep happens, and then it says, "Oh, see, it beeps, so the margins are set." So they did something completely unrelated to setting the margins, and they thought they were doing the task. So it's in interviewing situations, you can also have people perform tasks and see if they really know how to do something or not. A third thing is creating trust. It's when people are being interviewed, sometimes it feels to them like they're having an exam, or you're querying them and you're looking for right or wrong answers. But actually the impression you should try and leave with them is that you're testing the system or the design, or you're getting knowledge from them, you're not testing them. So to provide a good data, that you should feel relaxed and trusting. Here's a little story of what it might be like from the perspective of somebody who's about to have a user test on them. So the person says, "Okay, today's the day I have to report to some building. She's a bit nervous, and when I spoke to a woman on the phone, she asked me a lot of questions about my background and experience. She seemed particularly gleeful that I wasn't competent using computers and equipment. I'm glad she's happy for me, but it's a recurring problem. I've always felt intimidated with electronics. She wants me to use something on the computer while some people watch me. Wow, it's an easy $50, and seeing that I don't know the people, it can't be too embarrassing. On the other hand, what if I'm the first person in the world that doesn't understand how to do whatever I'm supposed to do? What if I totally bomb? What if they ask me a question that is embarrassing and find out how stupid I really am? Well, I'll give it a go this time, but I don't think I'll do this again." So thoughts like that might be going through the head of people coming to talk to you. So you have to try and engage in a way that builds trust. And finally, informing design. So you can actually help and we'll talk more about this next week, but you can, the user can help inform your design in very interesting ways by engaging with the objects that you're trying to work at. So, for example, in this case, this is an example from Apple. Apple were trying to design a digital camera a long time ago, and they weren't quite sure where to put the buttons on the back of the camera. So what they did is they had a piece of wood carved out in the shape of the camera, and then they gave people stickers, and they asked people to put a sticker on the camera where they thought the capture button should be, would take the picture, and a sticker on the camera where they think the mode button should be to change mode or to change functions and so forth. So here's a picture of some of the stickers put on the camera, and then they took a photograph of that and took all the stickers off and gave it to the next person. So by doing that 20 or 30 times, they got an idea about where people were expecting the button to be placed for capturing the image. And so this is a good example of how you could use the user to inform the design. There's some other techniques as well. So one is to get people to show things, like we just showed with the margins. Drawing, so you could ask people to draw a user interface like it would be, or draw some sort of process. Keep on asking the same question, but in different ways until you get 5 whys. So you could, you could ask somebody, well, why do you like the layout of this user interface? The person might say, well, I really like the color. You say, well, why do you think the color makes you like the layout? And keep on asking that question over and over again to explore more deeper. A very common technique is a think aloud technique, and should we talk while, not talk why? But so the idea is that you have people to perform a task, and while they're performing the task, they're saying out loud what they're thinking about in their mind. So the person will be saying, okay, now I'm going to try and start this app on my mobile phone for talking to my friends, and they start the Snapchat. And okay, now I'm going to try and take a picture by pushing this button here, and they push the button, and oh, the picture's not quite right, so I'm going to take another picture. Oh, now I need to try and find my friend, so now I search through the menu. So they're just kind of talking all the time what they're doing, and you record that whole conversation, and it's supposed to be what they're thinking in their mind. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about today is a technique that kind of pulls some of these together called empathy maps. I guess Robert learnt this last year in the design thinking course, but this is a way for you to explore different elements of the user's needs and look for contradictions in what the user's doing that might help inform that. So in many ways, empathy is the basic foundation of the human-centered design process. So empathy is being able to understand somebody else's situation or context. And you build it by observing users and their behavior in context. It helps you, and by engaging with individual users, and also by experiencing what the user experiences. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to put yourself in the other person's position, so you deeply understand what their needs are and what their environment is they operate in. So why do you think that would be important? Why would it be important to be able to empathize with somebody? Yeah, that's definitely true. Are there any other reasons, do you think? Yep, you need to figure things out, yep. So you need to understand their experience, you need to figure out how they're using. Can anybody think of anything else? Well, maybe another reason is that as a designer, you also need to be able to communicate not just with the end user, but with other people as well. So, for example, if you developed well, maybe going back to the designing a toy for a 5-year-old girl. So, you designed this toy for the girl. You've sat with lots of 5-year-old girls, played with them, talked to them. You've pretended that you're a 5-year-old girl yourself and played and done stuff. But then what you've got to do is you have to sell your design or the idea of your design to somebody else in marketing or in production or some other part of the company that's actually going to make it. And the marketing guy might say, well, I've looked at that and it's really stupid. Girls aren't going to like that. And then now you've got to be able to persuade him that actually you do know what girls like and they will like it. Or the production guy says, well, I've looked at it and boy, it's going to cost twice as much if we add this piece of fur onto your toy or whatever, and then you've got to explain why that's going to be worth it. So there's a number of reasons why you need to empathise. One is to understand people's users' problems, to also, one of the most important reasons is to uncover unexpected insights. So when you can really understand what the person is thinking and doing and their needs, that's where you can uncover the insights that might help meet those needs. So, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to really clearly define the problem that they have. Like the example before with the person with the PDA, they were saying that they wanted a piece of software that would help them organise their calendar, but that really wasn't the problem that they had. The problem that they had is they had too many appointments that they were trying to do. So with the problem definition, the goal is to try and provide deep understanding of user and design space and also provide some actionable problem statement. So a good problem statement is one like this. So the user needs something in a way that does something. And so as a designers, how can we do this verb phrase? So for example, in the PDA example, you could say, well, maybe the woman's name they were talking to was Sarah. So you could say, well, Sarah needs a way to organise their appointments in a way that provides them with more free time. So one way of doing that is by using an empathy map. And so so an empathy map is a way that you can collect together all your observations and draw out insight. There are several ways of doing that, and so I printed out an example of an empathy map. So I'll pass this around. So this is an example of an empathy map here, and you can see it's a piece of paper that has 4 quadrants and this person in the middle. So there's one that has say in it, one that has do, think, and feel, and then there's a stakeholder, and then your list of insights here. And at the bottom, written very small, is the problem statement. So, and it says the stakeholder needs a way to do something because of something. So I'll pass those around. And then I'll talk about which each of those. So you can see you've got the 4 quadrants. And the say comes out from your interviewing. So you'll interview somebody or a group of people, and you'll collect together a whole bunch of quotes from their interviews. And so in the say quadrant, you put down what are some of the quotes or important words that the user has said. In the do quadrant, you put down behaviours that you notice from the user, actions and behaviours. So the person might say, oh, my life's really, really super busy and I've got all these things doing. But then when you actually observe their lives, you see, well, actually they spend half their time sitting around watching TV. So they're saying they're really busy, but they're actually doing something a little bit different. And then the thinking, so on the left side of here, this is what you observe. And the right-hand side, this is what you try and understand. So one of them is the thinking part. And the thinking is, here you try and write down what you think that your user might be thinking, or what their beliefs are. And then on the bottom side here, you write down what you think the person might be feeling. So the person with the PDA, they might be feeling frustrated because they can't get organised enough. So that's the empathy map. And then at the centre of the empathy map is the stakeholder. We've already talked a little bit about stakeholders, but in this case, you have to think there about key elements of a target person, what the occupation is, what their motivation is, and you express this as some sort of adjective description. So let me show you a little video of the process of using empathy maps, and then I'll talk a little more and I'll show you some examples of empathy maps that have been put together. So this video here, I guess. Actually, I'll show you 2 videos.
We will now shadow a student who is working on a design challenge. But it's not too simple yet powerful.
pause this. So this is a video coming from the Stanford University D School, the design school, and it talks about the problem definition step and how empathy maps are used in the definition step. And in this case, the problem they're looking at is sunscreen and how to get people to use sunscreen more often to protect themselves from sunburn.
Tools that can help us in understanding others. Lucas is interested in applying design thinking to the prevention of skin cancer. This is a complex problem that does not have one solution. Where can he start? Sun exposure is a major risk factor for skin cancer, so exploring how people protect themselves from the sun seems like a promising place to start. Are there opportunities for innovative solutions there? Lucas does an internet search to find background information. However, since his goal is to invent a novel solution for this problem, he has to go beyond searching for what others have already come up with. So Lucas goes out to observe how people protect themselves from the sun. He has his own experiences and preconceptions, but he observes with fresh eyes and pays attention to every detail, looking for surprises and things that challenge his assumptions. He also engages them in conversation to learn more details. He captures observations and quotes on his notebook. An ice cream vendor arrives. Lucas realizes that he must work outdoors most of the day, a perfect person to ask about his sun protection habits. Lucas's detailed notes will help him identify opportunities for improving sun protection. To make sense of his observations, Lucas uses a framework called empathy map. He reviews his notes and decides to focus on the ice cream vendor. On the left side of the empathy map, Lucas uses the sections labeled say and do to unpack what he heard and saw from the ice cream vendor. Once he completes the say and do sections, Lucas moves to the right side of the empathy map. Here, he will make inferences about the person's thoughts and feelings. For example, the ice cream vendor said, "I don't know why there is so much hype with sun exposure." Lucas infers from this that the vendor thinks exposure to the sun is not dangerous. Going from observations to inferences will allow Lucas to uncover and define more meaningful, non-obvious problems. Focusing on Mark, the ice cream vendor who spends a lot of time at outdoor events, Lucas composes a problem statement that synthesizes one of Mark's needs related to sun protection. The third element in the problem statement, the insight, captures the inference from the empathy map that led Lucas to that need.
Okay, so that's showing how they used the empathy map. In that case, he did some observations, he did some background research, he went out and watched people, and then he talked to the ice cream vendor, and he discovered that there was the key insight was that the ice cream vendor thought that sunscreen was only for kind of social fun activities, not for work activities. So maybe there's an opportunity there to design some sort of sunscreen that is marketed in a way that people will use it during work. So when you have an empathy map like this, one of the important things is to look for conflicts or mismatches between the different quadrants. So if the person says that they want to be really organised with their calendar, but then if you observe them and they don't normally refer to their calendar very often during their day to see the tasks they're doing, then you can see that what they're saying, what they're doing is a mismatch, a conflict. And that's where you could see there's an opportunity for designing a solution for them as well. There's a second video I want to show that goes a bit more depth in empathy maps, so let me show you that one as well here. It's this one. I think there's two. It's this one here.
To really
Oh no, not this one. It's this one here. And this is from the perspective of a marketing person, but the same skills can be applied for interface design as well. So they're going to talk about how to use empathy maps to engage with the market.
key to getting to know your audience on a completely new level. So if you've always heard that you need to get inside the head of your market, this is a great way to do it. Now, the reason that you use this is because sometimes as a marketer, it's very easy to essentially just forget that you're talking to an actual person. You start thinking about your market in terms of, females 18 to 34 who ride bicycles or something like that. You think about them in terms of segments, but maybe personas, but demographics and psychographics aren't what's buying your products. It's actually people, and using empathy maps can help with that. So in order to do that, right, how do you do that? How do you think about what these people are and who these people are, what they're thinking about? You want to use an empathy map. Here's where they come in to help. So on a piece of paper, you basically sort of just draw out something square on a local whiteboard or paper somewhere, and you divide into 4 sections. And you've got see, hear, think and feel, and say and do it. I'm going to show you what this looks like in just a second. Basically, you're going to put the symbol of your target audience in the middle, and if needed...
So his empathy maps are a little different from what you've got there, but you'll see that it still applies as well. So there are a number of ways you can...
You can put additional sections at the bottom, which I'm going to also show you on this, called pain and gain. So let's go ahead and bring this up. Now, this is a sample empathy map. Now, you can draw one like this, like we have here, just kind of a little face in the middle, or you can actually just put a picture of, going through either clip art or something like that, but finding an actual picture of who represents your avatar. And let's say it's a 27-year-old male. So find a picture of a guy in his 20s, put that picture on here, and then above it, where he's actually using his brain to think and feel, right? You would actually put it, okay, what is he thinking and feeling about on a day-to-day basis? What is this person thinking and feeling? When you're thinking about what they're seeing, what are they looking at day-to-day? What sort of experiences do they have? What are they saying and what are they doing? What actions are they taking? What do they hear? What's the conversations that they're having inside their own heads? What's their self-talk telling them? And then you've got pain and gain at the bottom. And pain is basically, what are they running from? And gain is, what are they running toward? So it kind of gives you an idea of their motivations. Now, this is not something that's going to take you 30 seconds and then you're going to have this perfect little avatar built out. But it is something that you should spend quite a bit of time with thinking about. And it might take you a day. So, but doing some brainstorming, keeping this in front of you, having conversations with your customers, and as they may tell you, oh man, here's what just came up, or here's the type of stuff that I do on a day-to-day basis, you might be able to just add to this and get a better understanding of who your customer is. So again, when you're going through, ask yourself these types of questions. So thinking and feeling, what's exactly important to them, right? What do they think the word is word of mouth, more credible than online reviews? Like, what do they think about those different tactics? What do they think about Pinterest versus Facebook? What problems are they keeping them up at night, right? What sort of self-talk? We talked about that with hearing. When it comes to seeing, what do they look for in a quality product? How do they know something looks good? Do aesthetics even mean anything? They might not even care. Saying and doing, what actions are they taking? Are they comfortable buying online, or do they need to see something through the mail? Pain and gain. Again, what are they moving from? What are they moving toward? Or what are they trying to get? These are the types of questions you want to think about when you're filling out your empathy maps. And if you have a team, this is a great exercise to do together as a team. So this is a very simple one. Here's your hack for the day. Just print out an empathy map and fill it out. Now, if you want, you can use our slide for the empathy map. You can find it on SlideShare, and there'll be a link to that on the blog post as well. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just click on the link below this video. It'll take you right to the blog post. And if you have questions about how to use this, or maybe you've tried it and just have other things you like better, we're always open to new ideas, and we'd love to hear kind of what your thoughts are. So just go ahead and drop over to that blog post, leave a comment down for us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks.
Okay. So it's a simple, from a marketing perspective, how to use empathy maps. So we talked about the stakeholder, and then the need. So when you're trying to fill out this, and the need is kind of so the stakeholder is in this box here. It's small for writing very much, but you could put more information about who you're designing for. Here is the need, and what this is what helps define your design. And needs really are verbs, not nouns. So they're the activities that should be done, and you can identify this out of any contradictions that you notice between these quadrants here as well. Sometimes when a person says something different from what they're going to do, for example. And then the final step is the key insight. So based on the needs and based on the observations and what you've written down here, you should be able to get some insights from here as well. So this is where insights also grow from contradictions between different quadrants as well. So let me give you an example of a couple of empathy maps that have been done. And these were, let me show you here. Okay. So I think it's this one. Is it this? No, not this one. This one here, okay. So, it's hard to read it, isn't it? Okay, so this is the final map, but we'll look at the stakeholders. So this problem they're addressing here was helping, developing some way to help people get jobs after they've just graduated from university. So first of all here, so this is the final empathy map developed, but we'll go through each of those slides separately. You can see it's kind of in the same structure as here. They've got their problem statement across the side and everything like that. So this is a stakeholder, a 23-year-old who's just graduated from business administration. She's intelligent, determined, objective, sensible, ambitious, and wants to enter the labour market. She's accepted a job offer. It's not exactly what she's looking for because of the restrictions and difficulties encountered in her relationship with employees. So then the person interviewed her, and this is some of the things that she said. I'm looking for deals mainly in consulting at better wages. I'm going back to my old job, but just to be another offer, so she doesn't like her current job. If there was an offer in the consulting industry, I would accept it even with a lower salary. I have no experience in other areas, so I ended up with no options. So here's a bunch of quotes of what she said. And then the person can observe what she's been doing or ask what she's been doing over the last little while. So she's registered websites that provide jobs. She's sent resumes to people. She's talked to people that might give her jobs. She's contacted her former employer to ask for a job in that area. And then, so this is what the interviewer thought based on her, what she said and what she did. She'd like to prefer to work in an area with better job opportunities. She was willing to accept less profitable or less salary because there's better options. And she thought that maybe accepting a job as a temporary administrator may provide enough experience to compete for better jobs in the future. And then the feelings. So if you look at some of these statements here, what do you think some of the feelings are that the person has from those statements? She's defeatist, yep, that's one thing. She could be defeatist, yep. Yep. What other feelings do you notice from there? Yep, you can tell frustration, maybe from the last sentence, I'm going back to my old job, just be another office. Yep. Anything else you can pick from that?
Lack of understanding of the market, as in what she's applying to or what she wants to do.
Yep, that could be true too. So let's see, here's a list of feelings. So one is that she's feeling anxious and pressed to the point of accepting a job in any sector. She felt sidelined and rejected by her lack of experience. She's feeling anger. There's no interest from companies recruiting. And so there's some of the feelings. And then based on that, these are some of the insights that the person got. So he listed 4 or 5 insights. The students depending on the goodwill of employees to get a chance of work. The student wants to get a job where she can apply the knowledge acquired at university, being valued by her competency and ability, and where she can build a solid career receiving a fair wage. Companies are not popularly stimulated to hire young professionals who have recently come out of university unless they have a reasonable background of experience. So a few insights gathered from there. And so here's the final problem statement. The student who's just completed his undergraduate degree is looking for her first good job, needs a way to convince employees that she's able to and capable and that she owns adequate skills and knowledge to be employed and act as an administrator. So that's the need right there. And the insight is that because she wants to get a job where she can apply the knowledge acquired at university, being valued by her competency and ability, and where she can build a good solid career receiving a fair wage. So that's one example of how to apply the empathy map technique. And so the goal of the empathy map is to create this problem statement at the end, which hopefully has some good insight at the end. And then once you've got that, that's when you can start looking at how technology can be applied. Let me show you a second example as well. It's in a similar area, but it's so this is also looking at the challenge of getting a job after university. So they started with the empathy map here, and first of all the say. So again, they interviewed some people, and here's some things that the person said, lots of statements. She wanted to pursue a PhD, but she didn't get the opportunity, so she joined corporates instead. She can't skip meetings, she can't be lazy anymore. She has to follow a dress code. She has less time to party with her friends. She finds the office to be boring. So there's a whole bunch of comments down there. With that many, what you typically do is group them into related themes and then hopefully address just one of the themes. So in doing, she came up with this list of things here. She normally hangs around with her friends. She likes to dress trendily. She normally leaves work early. She doesn't interact with people at work other than her team members. She's on the phone, uses social networking. She doesn't retain eye contact. She asks her mentors lots of questions. So you can look to see if there's any conflicts between this and the first one. So for example, she says here, number 10, she seldom maintains eye contact while talking. And if you go back to the interview thing here, she says that number 7, she's more confident of herself. But when you're more confident of yourself, then you often maintain eye contact when you're talking to people. So she says that she's confident, but actually in her actions, she looks like she's not as confident as she says she is. She says that she finds the office to be boring, but in her actions, she doesn't engage with any people in the office apart from her team members. So there's potentially some conflicts between or contradictions between what she says and what's actually happening. And then thinking, so this is what the interviewer thought about her. One is that she's anxious because she has some perception of corporate image. She's not, she kind of wants her office to be like a college, to be more fun like the college would be. And she's not being her natural kind of self. And then these are some of the feelings that they thought was expressed. So she's feeling bored, she's feeling restricted, she feels she has to change to fit in the office environment. She feels she needs to, she feels she's not doing very well. And the stakeholder that they're looking at is a fresh graduate from college in her early 20s. She loves partying and spending time with her friends. She wants her office, she wants her office to have less restrictions and be more like college. So then the problem statement, you can't read that, but she needs to find a way to enjoy and have more fun at work without affecting the office environment or discipline. So maybe the key insight is having fun at work while not changing the office. Let's look here. So it says the insight is she's not open to experimentation. She needs a certain perception of work environment. She feels she needs to behave in a certain way. So hopefully, once you've got that insight, you can think about how technology or other things can be used to help address her main problem. So that's a couple of examples of how the empathy map works. Does anybody have any questions about that?
How are we getting for that?
Sorry?
How are we getting for like that of someone?
Oh, of somebody.
Do you observe them?
So that's a good question. So there's several ways. So, of course, to fill this out, a lot of information comes from what the people say. So what your job is basically to try and collect the information on the right-hand side, and then from that information, well, you have to think about who this person here is, but then collect information from the right-hand side, and from that information, then infer the insight or the thoughts on the right-hand side here, from the left-hand side. So, of course, the way you get what people are saying is you normally will interview them. So you sit down and talk to somebody or a group of people and collect all the information here. The doing is often done by observing people, and then thinking and feeling is often the insight from these saying and doing. Although sometimes when you're interviewing people, you could actually do a check while you're interviewing them. So, for example, when the person was talking to a 23-year-old student that sounded like she was frustrated at work, the interviewer could say, well, it sounds to me like you're kind of frustrated about what's happening at work right now. And the person will say, oh yes, I'm really feeling frustrated or whatever. Or you could actually, in the interview, you can ask questions that will lead them to expressing feelings. So, how do you feel when you're at work? Or when, for the other student, when you have to turn up to work at a certain time and leave at a certain time, how does that make you feel? And then they'll hopefully say some things that will be the feeling questions. Those are some methods you can use to capture that. So I'm going to give you an assignment next week, the first assignment, and the assignment's going to involve designing interface to help people complete supermarket shopping, like we talked about a little bit today. So what I'll do is I'll give it out to you on Tuesday, but part of the assignment will be to generate an empathy map, and then the second part of the assignment will be to create some sketches and some ideas around the user interface that could help that. So what you'll need to do is go and talk to people who have experience in supermarket shopping. Hopefully most of you have had experience like that. So you could talk to each other, or you could go and find some specific people. Like you might decide, well, I'm really interested in helping like the mum with kids who goes shopping with the kids in the supermarket. So you could go to a supermarket and you could talk to people there and find them. So I'll give it to you on Tuesday, and you'll have about a week and a half to complete the assignment, so it's not too much, it's not too rushed. And then what we'll do next week is I'll start talking on Tuesday about some ways that you can very quickly sketch out and prototype interface ideas. So that's about all I had for you today, although I've got a couple of things to hand out more. One is this document about contextual techniques. So this document has some ideas about how you can gather information from interviews and how you can look at data from interviews as well and communicate that. So I'll pass that around. And I've also got another form here that relates to empathy maps. So the empathy map idea was an idea developed by the University of Stanford Design School, and they have a really good workbook that encompasses the whole area of design thinking. And the course that we're doing here isn't design thinking, but it touches on some elements of that, like the empathy map. So this is a method sheet that talks about why and how you can use empathy maps. Basically just says what I showed in the lecture today. And the last thing I wanted to check was to make sure, do all of you have a University of Canterbury account now? Do you have a University of Canterbury account? You don't, do you? But you do. Yes. Oh, but you're not enrolled in the course, so that's probably why you don't have an account. So that's just because I'm going to upload the slide material to the Learn directory. And I don't know if your role hasn't gone through yet, but I think I can still add you to the, anyway, going to add you already, yeah, okay. So, and I think I can, we'll have to figure out how to get your information there, but I can certainly add Amit as well. So that'll give you an access to all of the slides that we show and the material as well. Great. So does anybody have any other questions? Yeah.
The main difference between the think and feel, think you may some example.
That's a good question. So so thinking is, in this case, what you're doing is you're writing down what you think the person is thinking in their mind. And in the feel one, you're writing down what you think they are feeling. So if we go back here a little bit in the slides, forward a little bit, you'll see. So in this case here, this person says, oh, well, she wants her office to be like her college. So that's what the interviewer thinks the person is thinking who's they're interviewing. And then if you look at the feeling examples, the person feels bored or she feels restricted or bounding. So this is, the thinking is more of your thoughts about what the person is, about the person's situation, and the feeling is the feelings that the person is feeling inside, what you think they're feeling inside. Does that make sense?
So the feeling is the empathy that you are
No, it's not the empathy you're feeling, it's the feelings of the person. So if the person, like the college graduate, if they are feeling, maybe another example, if we talk about the shopping in the supermarket. So the person might say, no, there might be a mother with a couple of children, they might say, oh, when I go to shop in the supermarket, I have to shop really quickly because I can only spend half an hour because I have to be home again with the children. And so then you might say, well, how does that make you feel? And the person will say, well, I feel really rushed because I have to rush around really quickly. So in the feeling area, you would say, oh, she feels really rushed or under pressure to shopping. And in thinking, you might say the person thinks they don't have enough time to go shopping or to complete the shopping. So this is more about what they are, their emotions, and this is what you're thinking about the emotions, yeah. So does that make sense? Yeah. But, so I said what I'll do is I'll send out an assignment. I may even email it to on Monday, depends if I get myself all organised or not, otherwise I'll get you on Tuesday, and you'll have about a week and a half to complete, or 2 weeks to complete it. And that'll be the first assignment will be with 10% of your grade, and it'll combine completing a empathy map and also developing some sketching of interfaces. Don't have to do any programming or anything yet, but that's just to get started. Great. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay, well if that's it, then we should break. It's lunchtime, and I'll catch up with you guys a little bit later. So.